Hello and welcome to New Economic Thinking. I'm here today with Hans-Werner Sinn, who is a professor of economics at the University of Munich and president of the IFO Institute. Professor Sinn, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's look at the European Union economy in aggregate. Let's look at Germany specifically. 5.5% unemployment, booming exports, current account surplus equivalent to 7% of GDP. So what's the problem? Why is Germany so unhappy with the European Union right now?
The current account surplus is way too large, with 7.5%. It's absurdly large, I must say. It shows that something is wrong in the Eurozone. We have strong imbalances. Germany is too cheap relative to the South. The South is too expensive relative to Germany. And the question is whether the tensions resulting from that will be able to be solved inside the Eurozone or outside. I think we have to look for rather radical solutions in Europe, creating an open currency union where it is possible for countries also to exit rather than staying in and trying to regain their competitiveness by a cumbersome process of real devaluation by cutting wages and prices and so on. But this realignment is unavoidable, either inside or outside the euro, because Southern Europe lost its competitiveness in the inflationary credit bubble, which the euro brought about. The euro reduced the interest rates. The governments were borrowing, private people were borrowing, the governments increased the wages of the government employees beyond productivity. Private people bought real estate. There was a construction boom. The unions could increase the wages of the construction workers beyond productivity in the entire economy. And so there was inflation. And this enormous inflation, 25% relative to the rest of the Eurozone, in Spain, for example, deprived the country of its competitiveness. And what is true for Spain in a similar sense is true for other Southern European countries.
There are some people that said that the competitiveness problem occurred even before that, when Germany implemented the Hartz reforms, which effectively reduced the price of labor in Germany relative to other countries. Now, the Germans have responded that everybody in Europe should do the same thing as they did. They restructured, but of course they did it in the context of a growing economy, and they, in some sense, derived first mover advantage. They were the first to do it. So in effect, you had a competitive internal devaluation. The countries then were locked into this fixed exchange rate, and so it's hard to argue that, say, the Italians or the Spanish can do the same thing.
So Germany did do the Hartz reforms, that is true. But it was under pressure. It was not so voluntary as one might think. Germany at the time had 12% rate of unemployment. That was much worse than even France today. You know, France has a problem with 10% rate of unemployment. So what happened? What happened was that capital left the country at the time. It went to Eastern Europe because the wages were so low. They had just come into the Western Hemisphere and offered themselves for investors. It went to America to buy structured securities, which in the end turned out to be
a
disaster. And the money went through the banking sector into government bonds of Southern Europe and into credit given to banks in Southern Europe, which then handed over the credit to private people buying real estate. So there was not enough investment. Germany had the lowest rate of net investment 10 years ago among all OECD countries. And in that desperate situation, the government thought they have to do something to improve the competitiveness of German workers and create jobs. And basically what they did is they deprived many unemployed of their unemployment benefits. We had a two-tier unemployment benefit system, and the second tier was abolished. People were pushed down to social aid with brutal force, which meant that they reduced the minimum wage demands which private employers had to satisfy, and that indeed created lots of jobs. But Germany never went into deflation. So it just had a low rate of overall inflation because of that, while Southern Europe inflated a lot.
Which in some respects mitigated the impact, because at least the external sector, there was a source of demand for the external sector. I guess my point is that within Europe right now, you have a German growth engine, but really the rest of the world is experiencing considerably more challenges.
Of course. If you don't have enough internal investment demand and the savings move out of the country, there's a portfolio effect, then you get an internal slump. But fortunately, the other countries of Europe boomed at the time, and they were buying German products. So for two reasons, Germany developed a current account surplus. There was an increasing demand for its own exports because the rest of Europe was booming at the time. And second, the German slump depressed the German imports, and the difference between exports and imports was growing. So that is what was happening. And now during the crisis, it's all reversed. The capital, the investors shy away from Southern Europe. They have seen that much of the capital was burned. They understood there was a mistake. They want to invest elsewhere in the world, including in Germany, and Germany has a real estate boom, has had it since 2010. But Southern Europe is now, for the same reason that Germany booms, in a crisis. Capital can only be invested once, either in one country or in the other country, but not in both at the same time.
Let me go back to something you said earlier, because what was interesting in your comments to me earlier was the suggestion that there are political limits to an internal devaluation, especially one when it is experiencing genuine deflation, which would suggest by implication that the usual route that one would normally deal with it to engender these adjustments would be by currency adjustments. Of course, you can't do that in a common currency union. I believe you've been on record as suggesting not a Grexit, as many people are talking about today, but shall we call it a Germano exit, suggesting that you need a revaluation of perhaps a new Deutschmark or a Deutschmark block, and that the euro could be left to the periphery nations, which could then become a soft currency, and you can achieve.
I said that? No.
Well, that has been suggested by certain people in Germany.
That has been suggested by George Soros. I had a debate with George about this in Project Syndicate, where he suggested that Germany exit rather than that the one or the other country in Southern Europe exits. And I was very much opposed to his view. I thought if Germany exits the Eurozone, then the Eurozone is ending. Because the whole idea was to bring France and Germany together. We cannot divide these two countries. Neither can we have a dividing line between Italy and Germany. So these are the three pillar countries of the EU and the Eurozone.
But as you suggested, France and Italy have a competitiveness problem vis-a-vis
not
Germany.
as big. So France does not have a competitiveness problem. In France, the price level always increased on par with the average. Italy is different. Italy inflated a lot, even though it didn't have the super boom in the time before the crisis. And Italy will now have to do something about it. But I believe they can do it inside the Eurozone, because unlike the other crisis countries, Spain, Portugal, Greece, their foreign debt to GDP ratio is rather small. The others have about 100%, and Italy has just 30%. So I don't see a problem of external debt sustainability for Italy, really, and therefore I believe they can do it. If they carry out German-style reforms in the labor market that lead to a wage a larger wage dispersion,
yes.
An adjustment at the lower end, which would also have an implication for the average, that would be a possibility to solve the problem. In particular, if you see it together with the QE program. The QE program of the ECB is now leading to a devaluation of the euro. The devaluation means more demand for exports.
Although Germany has been the biggest beneficiary of that so far.
Yeah, if you wish, but Germany will hopefully inflate now. That would be, I think, the rationale for QE. And if Italy and others stay put and don't co-inflate with Germany, then they can gradually improve the competitiveness of their economy. But that would require labor market reforms to make wages flexible downward.
Which the Italians seem to be undertaking right now, to be fair to them.
Well, yeah, they try.
They're trying it.
And I hope they will succeed.
Do you get a sense that German policymakers agree that they need to reflate now, because they do seem to like running a large external surplus? And that there has historically been some aversion towards expanding domestic demand in Germany and engendering some inflation. It's obviously not in the mindset.
No, inflation is not in the mindset of the Germans. So this policy, which is the only possibility for the Eurozone to rebalance, will be problematic from a German perspective, because the German price level will have to go up quite a bit. If we really wanted to have 2% inflation on average, and say Southern Europe stayed at 0%, which I don't believe will happen, and France, say, stays at 1%, or and the rest at 2%, then Germany will have to inflate by 4% per year. If we do that for 10 years, then the German price level will be 50% higher, and then the Eurozone will be rebalanced. So these are very difficult scenarios from a German perspective.
Jens Weidmann going along with that. But let me just go back to your point about perhaps the lack of permanence about the currency union, in the sense that it should be an open door policy. You can have countries leaving and coming back in again. In effect, doesn't that risk destroying the currency union, or at least reconfiguring it towards the old style ERM?
Not quite. We still have the same currency. But if we have more flexibility, this flexibility will be foreseen by investors. They will know there is a devaluation risk. They will be charging risk premia in the interest rates, which will imply that not too much capital will flow the wrong way in the first place, and that will be a disciplinary device. If we don't have that, if we guarantee everyone can stay in the Eurozone, whatever he or she does, then there is an incentive to overborrow. We artificially have to depress interest spreads, and the incentive to borrow will be unlimited. Okay, we can say you can't, we have a fiscal compact, we have a stability and growth compact, but I don't think that the political constraints will ever be hard enough to prevent overborrowing. Let me have a look to the United States. Yes. My view is that Europe can learn a lot from the United States. In the United States, we have a fiscal federalism and lots of autonomy for single states. But if a single state overborrows and goes bankrupt, it goes bankrupt. The federal government would not rescue it, and the Fed would not come to buy the government bonds of the single state. California, Illinois, Minnesota are close to bankruptcy, and would the Fed buy their state bonds?
But there are implicit fiscal transfers, because you do have a United States Treasury.
Yeah, well, I'm not against that. I'm not against that. I'm very much in favor of creating the United States of Europe with a federal budget, with a common army, with everything that belongs to a common state. But we cannot anticipate that by just acting as if we had created this common state without having done it. You know, it's for me a little bit the following story. Suppose Mrs. Merkel loves Mr. Hollande. It's not really true, but suppose. And suppose Mr. Hollande loves the money of Mrs. Merkel, which is more true. The question is, should they hand over the money before the marriage, Or should they wait for the marriage to take place to then have the common budget and have mutual reinsurance systems, the OMT program and everything, which effectively means debt mutualization? I strongly think the sequencing is important. If we make it wrong and we introduce a fiscal union in Europe before the marriage, that is before the creation of the United States of Europe, then we will never get it.
Let me go back to the question of a temporary exit in order to achieve adjustment. The most obvious country right now is Greece. There's much talk about a Grexit. First of all, do you think that's going to occur? And secondly, if it does, will it endanger the integrity of the monetary union?
The Grexit will not occur because for political reasons, one will always provide more money. But it should occur. It would be better for the Greek. We have this mass unemployment of 26%, 50% youth unemployment. And we have this despite all the money that was given to Greece. 5 years ago, we did have a Grexit debate already. And then the public credit, which Greece had received at that time from the ECB system, was 50 billion euros. And by now, the overall public credit Greece has received from other countries and the ECB system is 323 billion euros. So 270 more than at the time. At a GDP of 180, it has not helped. It does not help at all.
Arguably, it's not because it hasn't gone to Greece itself. It's been a covert bailout to the banks who irresponsibly.
No, this is wrong. If we decompose the 300 billion overall credit, we can say about 100 billion was used to finance the current account deficit of Greece, the accumulated one. 100 billion was used to bail out foreign creditors who were able to escape and bring their money back home. And 100 billion was used to allow Greek rich people to escape and bring their wealth abroad. That is the figures.
Let me ask you one final question. You have been actively involved in challenging certain actions by both the German and the German government and the European Central Bank. You've taken cases to the Karlsruhe, the German constitutional.
No, I have not.
Oh, I thought I.
No, I never.
You've supported some of the actions.
No. I was an official witness of the court, asked by the court. I'm not belonging to any party going to the court.
But do you, in your view, when Mario Draghi, for example, said we will do whatever it takes, now so far he hasn't actually done anything, but in theory, he is providing an implicit unlimited guarantee to other countries. And my understanding of the German constitution, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but it is that there are limits as to what you can actually do. You can't provide an unlimited guarantee, and that many have argued that this is in fact constitutional. And my understanding is the court has not ruled definitively on many of these measures.
No, the court has not yet ruled, but it has published a statement in February 2014 arguing that in his opinion, the ECB is overstepping its mandate, but before it wants to rule, it wants to ask the European Court about its opinions and about ways to modify the OMT program so that it becomes compatible with the Maastricht Treaty. Now, the Council General has already declared that he believes everything is in line with the Maastricht Treaty, and I expect the European Court to say the same thing. So then the German court will have to decide what to do. It has already specified what it believes. At least it will have to argue that if this is the official view of the European Court, it might be respectable, but then the German parliament, when agreeing to the Maastricht Treaty, obviously had an illusion of what the Maastricht Treaty would imply.
Certainly and the Stability and Growth Pact would have
and with this interpretation, if this is the interpretation that you can have unlimited promises for investors at the risk of other countries, then it would not be compatible with the German constitution. That's what they might say. we will have to wait for.
It's a political wild card, certainly, and they're in a very, very difficult position. I'm sure that they are reluctant to inject themselves into what is essentially a very political, hugely political debate.
But you should know, the idea in Europe was we do not use the monetary union to bail out countries and their creditors. That is Article 125 of the EU Treaty, one of the most prominent treaties or clauses in this treaty. And Germany at the time had made this the condition to participate and give up the Deutschmark. And this is why the German court is so insisting. You cannot use the ECB system now to carry out all these bailout operations because it will be at the risk of the taxpayer. The ECB lends out money against interest. This interest normally flows to the finance ministries. Now it has already reduced the interest rate to zero, but in normal times. And if the interest doesn't come because the ECB finances bankrupt states, then it will be at the risk of the taxpayer who would have to compensate for the budget losses. And in the view of the German Supreme Court, this is all not possible. The ECB here goes beyond the mandate which the Bundestag was allowed to give it in the Maastricht Treaty. Now, if the European Court says it has the mandate, then we have a fundamental legal problem, but the European Court cannot rule what the German constitution implies.
But it is still a wild card that's still out there.
Oh, yeah.
I wish we had much more time to discuss it. I very much appreciate you taking the time to share your views with us, Professor Sin. Thank you very much for speaking
You're
with me
welcome.
today. Thank you.